And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed. To you it shall be for food. Genesis 1:29. Man did eat angels' food. He sent them meat to the full. Psalm 78:25. Everyday Manna with Lisa.
Hi everybody, and welcome to Everyday Manna. On today's program, we're going to be making homemade turkey pot pie, apple crisp with vanilla ice cream on top, and mashed potatoes with sour cream and white cheddar cheese. It's going to be a delicious day. We're going to start out by preheating a skillet to medium-high heat. Now, yesterday I cooked a turkey breast, and I had some leftover turkey, and this is a wonderful way to use your leftover turkey and any gravy that you might have left over. And I have both that I brought for today's program, and we're just going to make a delicious pot pie. But let's get started on our vegetables. We've got our skillet preheating. Our oven is preheating to 375 degrees. Let's get some butter in the skillet. I'd say about 4 tablespoons or so of butter. I mean, I love butter. It just makes everything taste better, so I do use a lot of butter. To that, I'm going to add a couple of tablespoons of olive oil, and what that does is raises the cooking temperature of the butter. Butter will burn, as you know, if you just use it by itself, but when you add a little bit of oil to it, what will happen is the cooking temperature of the butter is increased, and therefore it won't burn on you. So we're going to chop, I'd say, about half a cup or so of celery. We're going to do kind of traditional flavorings in our pot pie today. I make all kinds of pot pies. If I have leftover chicken, if I roast a chicken and I have leftover chicken, it makes a delicious pot pie. I always make pot pie with my turkey leftover, and that's just one of those things in my home that we just do. We always, if we have a turkey or a turkey breast, we make a pot pie the next day. It just is such a good way to revamp your turkey. Instead of just having leftovers, what you're doing is you're making a completely different dish, and it's absolutely delicious. We're going to chop 1 onion. We're going to take some shortcuts today. We're going to use frozen vegetables. You, by all means, could chop celery or, carrots and potatoes and onions and all that by yourself, but I'm going to use just the pre-frozen mixed vegetables, and I use them a lot. They've come a long way in the frozen vegetable department. You can get some really high quality vegetables, and they're picked and frozen immediately, and so they're really good. I'm not a real big fan of a lot of the canned vegetables, but the frozen vegetables I use all the time. And this is a pretty good size onion, so let's see what 1/2 of it looks like. But we want about, I don't know, half a cup or so. My onions are flying everywhere on me here. Of just medium diced up onions. If you make a roast, a beef roast one day, this is a good way to use up any leftover beef roast and gravy that you might have. You'd swap out the vegetables and the seasonings a little bit and make a beef pot pie, and it really is very good. We're just going to kind of saute those. Now what we're going to do is we're going to saute the vegetables, let them get just a little bit soft, and then we're going to make a roux out of the butter and the olive oil. And if you've never made a roux before, all it is equal parts of some type of fat. In this case, I'm using butter and olive oil, and equal parts that and flour. It's just one of those things, today, for instance, is a rainy day outside, and the humidity does affect the amount of flour that you will need. So on a day like today, I'm going to need more flour than I would, say, on a hot summer day. So, it just kind of depends. I can't really give you exact measurements there, but somewhere probably between 3 to 4 tablespoons or so of flour. We're going to add, I think I'm just going to use half that onion. I'm going to add about a teaspoon of dried rosemary. Oops, I got a little much there. And I always put my herbs in my hand and kind of crush them up a little bit before you add them to the pot, because that just releases the oils in there. And then about a teaspoon of dried thyme. If you had fresh, by all means, you could use the fresh herbs. I just don't have any. My rosemary is growing, though. I noticed yesterday that it's greening up and it's growing back, and it did come back. My thyme didn't make it, but the rosemary did. So we'll have fresh rosemary very soon. Add just a little bit of salt. I'd say about a teaspoon or so, because we're going to be using our gravy that already has some salt in it, and some freshly ground pepper. Let's turn that up just a little bit. Now you can make, if you want to, you could make your own homemade crust, and I've done that before, and it's very simple, very easy. But a good shortcut is the pie crust that you can get in your dairy department. You know, the ones, you know what I'm talking about. They're rolled up in a box, and they look like this. And this is what we're going to be using today, because I just didn't feel like making my own homemade. You can, though, and if you make your own homemade, you know, something you can do for pot pies is put your spices in your crust as you're making it. Put a little bit of thyme or a little bit of celery seed in there, and it's delicious that way. But we're not going to do that today. We're just going to use the pre-made up kind that you can get in your dairy department. We're going to use, now I have some leftover beautiful turkey breasts that I cooked yesterday in my crock pot at home. I put one in and I just let it simmer all day. And so we're going to use just some leftover turkey. You could, you know, a lot of these stores nowadays, I know locally here, a lot of our grocery stores are using the turkey breast, and they're doing the rotisserie turkey breast, and it's really delicious. You could buy that. You could, you know, in the deli department where you get the sliced meats, you could have them slice you off a big piece, not slice it in the little sandwich slices, but slice off a hunk of the turkey that they have behind the counter. You could do that. But if you make a turkey, this is a good way to use up some leftover meat. And the gravy, I brought my gravy too. I thought that's just too good to waste. You know, homemade gravy is very good. Just your favorite recipe there. Okay, our vegetables are softened. So what I'm going to do is add, I've got some flour here, and we're just going to add some flour to make a roux. Let's see how that works. Just kind of stir it in there. I think that's going to be plenty. Now what the flour will do, no, I think I need one more spoon. What the flour will do when you add your chicken broth, if you're using chicken broth or, you know, gravy or whatever you're using, it will thicken up the gravy so that when you cut your pot pie, it doesn't just run all over the place. It just kind of makes a nice thick gravy for you. We want to let that flour cook for about 30 seconds or so, just to kind of get rid of that raw flour taste. If you were making a gravy, you would start out this very same way without the vegetables and just let it get brown. But we've already got some gravy. So there's our base. Now, let's add the homemade gravy that I have left over. This is just turkey gravy. I took the drippings that were in the pan, and I thickened them with cornstarch and chicken broth. And as you can see, it's gelatinized, it's nice and thick. We're just going to add that right to, if you don't have homemade gravy left over, it's not a big deal. You can use just the roux that I did and some canned chicken stock and just add that in this place. But I did have the gravy, so I wanted to use it. So I'm going to turn that down just a little bit. You see how it just kind of comes up to a nice simmer, and it just tastes so good. We're going to add in our turkey. We're going to let that cook for just a second, and then we're going to add in our vegetables, our frozen vegetables, and I'll be right back with you in just a minute. And welcome back. Now our turkey base is ready. We're just going to add 1 bag of just mixed frozen vegetables. And that's all you need to do, or you could add your own home chopped if you wanted to. But I find really the frozen vegetables are just as good in this dish. And mine is a little bit thick. You see, my gravy had cornstarch in it, and then I added the flour to the roux. So I am going to add just a little bit of just canned chicken broth. I always buy the low sodium. I'm gonna add about, I don't know, 1/4 of a cup or so. You just measure what you think you need in yours. And there's our base for our pot pie. And it smells so good. Now, like I said, we're just going to be using plain rolled, the pie crusts that you can get in your dairy department. You can make your own if you want to, but I really do like these. They taste very good, and it's a whole lot easier than making your own, although I've done that too. They just come rolled up. They do come sometimes in your frozen department, but I like the ones in the dairy a little bit better. Now, of course, these are round, and my pan is oblong. So what I'm gonna need to do is use 2 of them and just kind of patch it. And I've just got a regular baking dish, and I've sprayed it with the non-stick spray, and I'm just placing my crust in there, and I'm gonna go ahead and use the other one. And we're just gonna patch it together. It's okay. You know, it tastes very good and very easy and very quick. If you made your own, of course, you would want to roll it out to a rectangle, but we're not gonna do that today. I need about probably 1/3 of this. And there you go. See how easy that is? And you just patch it together on the bottom, and no one will be the wiser. Then, take your filling. This is a heavy pot here, so hang on just 1 minute. And just pour the filling in your pan, just like that. Kind of spread it out. And then take another crust, which I bought 2 packages, and get you one of these out. Your oven, again, should be preheated to 375 degrees. Your filling, of course, is already cooked. Your vegetables are just a little bit, you know, they're still a little bit cold, but they'll warm up real quick. So really all you need to do in the oven is cook the crust, because the rest of it is good. Unroll, and then place that over top. You know, and I think I probably can get by with just one of these since I don't need the, and then just seal your edges. Seal your top. Can you see what I'm doing here? Seal your top down and just press it into the edges of your baking dish. And just like you would a pie, just seal it in there. It is important that you spray your pan with, you know, your nonstick spray, or you could, you know, grease it and flour it like you would. And then you want to make sure that you cut some slits in the top of your pot pie. Just real pretty. What that does is that allows the steam to come out so that it doesn't just, you know, burst on top of you. Okay? And into the oven this goes. And in about 45 minutes or so, you will have the most delicious homemade turkey pot pie. And you can save this, put this back in the refrigerator or the freezer, and keep it for another use, because we didn't need it today. Now next, what we're gonna make is another one of my favorite things, and that's an apple crisp. Now today I bought some beautiful Macintosh apples, and we're gonna make our own homemade topping. I'm gonna take another quick break, and when I come back, we're gonna start our apple crisp. I'll be right back. 1 John chapter 1 verse 9 says, if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. You know, my friends, God sees the hidden sins as well as the open sins. And sometimes we think that we're getting away with things when we do them privately, when we do them in secret. But you know what? God still sees them. He is with us 24/7. But the good news is that he will forgive both of those equally justly and fairly, and he will forget them, never to be remembered anymore. Remember that the Bible tells us that we will confess our sins, that God will forgive them. Have you confessed all of your hidden sins today? And welcome back. Now, we've started our apple crisp. I've got a few Macintosh apples. I chose Macintosh today for our apple crisp. Now, what an apple crisp is an apple dish that has a crumbly coating on top. And the way that I do apples is, I don't own an apple core. I cut my apple in half, and I'll move these other ones out of your way so you can see what I'm doing. I cut it in half. Let me get these done and I'll show you exactly. And I leave the skins on because, you know, most of your fiber and things like that are right there, and your nutrients are right there at the skin. And it's going to be cooked, so it'll be good. Take your apple, cut it in half. Cut it in half again. Get one piece on a diagonal and cut out the core. And it's just so much easier than, you know, pushing that core down the middle, and it gets it out, and it's a whole lot easier, and you don't have another gadget to keep up with them. Like I've said before, I'm not a big fan of gadgets, really, unless they just do something that something else I own won't do. And then just slice them, and we're dicing them in, you know, in just little pieces like that. We're going to actually saute these onions, or the apples. Sometimes with apple crisps, you don't necessarily saute the onions, but I keep wanting to call these onions the apples. But today I'm going to, because I'm going to add a little bit of a brown sugar to it, and it'll kind of caramelize, and it'll just add an extra layer of flavor. You do not have to saute these if you don't want to. Maybe, you know, you don't feel like taking that extra step. It just adds a little bit of extra flavor to the apples. I love Macintosh apples. You could use Granny Smith's for this dish. You could use Golden Delicious. You could use the Fuji apples. You could use the McCowan apples. You could use, you know, really about any kind. I wouldn't use the Red Delicious because they kind of get mushy when you cook. But a Macintosh apple is absolutely delicious for cooking. And raw as well. They're very sweet, they're very firm, and they hold their shape real well. We've got about 2 tablespoons of butter, and I'm just going to add the apples to that. I'm going to keep that dish because I'm going to be using that to put our crisp in. I need about half a cup of brown sugar, and I can't find my half a cup measurer, so I'm going to cheat and use, kind of make it up. It doesn't, you know, you don't have to be exact with this. You just want approximate measurements with that. And we're going to just kind of let these soften and caramelize just a little bit while we make our crumb coating. And to me, honestly, the best part of a crisp is the coating that's on top. It's so delicious. You could make it up many different ways. They all contain a few of the same basic ingredients. You know, and by the way, if you just wanted to do apples and just stop at this phase right here, saute these down, would be a delicious side dish to a pork roast or anything like that. And I think we have enough, so we'll just save these for another purposes. In my bowl, I've got about 3/4 of a stick or so of butter that I've just cubed. I've just made little small cubes out of it. I've got 1 cup of the instant oatmeal, the oats that you buy in the store. I need about 1.5 cups of flour. And I want about, I'd say 1/2 cup of brown sugar. Light or dark, it really doesn't matter, whichever you like the best. About 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, and we're going to add the other 1/2 teaspoon to our apples. So about 1/2 teaspoon total of that. Then I do something a little bit different with my crisps sometimes. I get about 3 graham crackers, place them in a baggie, take your rolling pin, and crush them up. and just add that right to your crumb topping. And I'm going to do the same thing with some nuts. Just put them in a bag. This is a great way to just kind of chop up your nuts a little bit, get them in smaller pieces. I don't really want big hunks. I just want little small pieces of pecans. You can use walnuts if you want to, but I'm going to use pecans today. Stir all that together in your bowl. Stir my apples here. I got to take a quick break. Over the break, all I'm going to do is get the apples, let them continue to saute. I'm going to peel some potatoes and get them in the pot because we're going to have sour cream and white cheddar potatoes. I'll be right back with you in just a minute. Welcome back. Now our casserole, our turkey pot pie, baked for about 45 minutes and it just looks delicious. And our apple crisp, we just put that crumbly topping over top and it baked for about 45 minutes and then we've just scooped some out and serve it with vanilla ice cream. Now we're going to move on to our potatoes. Now we just cooked 5 pounds of just white, Idaho potatoes until they were tender. We drained them. And we're going to do something a little different. Mashed potatoes is something you can make 1,000 different ways. I've got 8 ounces of sour cream. We're going to add that to that. And then we're going to take white cheddar and we're going to grate about a cup or so of white cheddar. And my cheddar's kind of breaking on me there. Just white cheddar cheese. Mashed potatoes, you can do so many different ways. You can put cheese in them. You can put cream cheese in them. You can put sour cream and you can do chives. You can do, sometimes, you get smashed potatoes where they leave the skins on. You can put bacon in them. Just so many different ways. But today, what we're going to put is some white cheddar. The reason I chose white cheddar is that, the potatoes are white. And so the yellow cheddar would show up a little bit too much. So we want to just get our cheese out of there. Remember, sometimes the cheese will stick to the back of the box. Let's move our cheese over here. Now, our potatoes are done. Let's add some salt because, potatoes, you got to add a lot of salt to mashed potatoes or they're just simply not good. That's one thing that you do need quite a bit of salt with. And then we're going to add some fresh ground pepper. If I was making this at home, I would have to leave the pepper out. My boys will not eat pepper in their mashed potatoes. They don't want to see that flecks of black, but they'll eat pepper on everything else. I can't figure that one out, but they don't. And there we go. Now I'm going to add just some plain milk, just 2% milk, because I don't want them to be too firm. Now, I like my potatoes done with a little beater like this. Some people, will use the potato masher, but I really do prefer just done with the beater. I use this particular kitchen tool a lot for a lot of different things. Just incorporate your potatoes into the sour cream and the butter first, or the milk, before you add your cheese. Because you want to make sure that all gets mixed up and then add in your cheese. Get the potatoes beaten. Pretty good. I love mashed potatoes. And you know, today's recipe is just such a comforting food on a day, maybe you've just had a particularly stressful day. There's nothing like the home-cooked comfort foods that we grew up with in pot pie. I mean, who didn't grow up eating pot pie? Most of the time, though, it's been the frozen one I have found, and you know, there really, truly is no comparison. You need to try your own homemade pot pie. Use the store-bought crust like I did, and it just really, honestly, it's not that difficult, and the flavor difference is just immense. So we're gonna add in our cheese. I grated about probably a cup or so of white cheddar cheese in your potatoes, and of course the heat of the potatoes will melt the cheese. It just looks so yummy and so good. So I believe that's good. Let's get our beater out of there, and we will put this over here. Deal with it later. Let's get a spoon. Now on our plate, we've already got us a serving of our delicious pot pie. And I don't put potatoes in my pot pie, so I serve it with potatoes just alongside the pot pie. Let's put just a little sprinkling more of the pepper on top of that. And so we've got our homemade pot pie, the turkey pot pie made with the leftover turkey. Then we've got our mashed potatoes with sour cream and white cheddar cheese. Then over here we've got our beautiful apple crisp that we baked off using the Macintosh apples and made that crumb topping, served with some vanilla ice cream. And of course you gotta have coffee with your dessert. And so there you go, there is a comfort meal from our home to yours. I'll see you tomorrow on Everyday Manna.
Thank you for watching Everyday Manna with Lisa. This program is made possible by viewers like you. Your support is continually needed to keep Christian programming on the air. Please send your best financial gift to Living Faith Television in care of Everyday Manna, P.O. Box 1867, Abingdon, Virginia 24212.